April 27th, 1973. A man sits in a lab in Menlo Park, California. The room is quiet. Scientists are watching, recording. He's not an astronomer, and he's not a physicist. He has no telescope, no data, and no instruments of any kind. He closes his eyes and travels 400 million miles away. Minutes later, he opens his eyes and describes, in precise detail, features of the planet Jupiter that no human being on Earth was supposed to know yet, including something that NASA wouldn't officially discover for another 6 years. I'm Naeem, welcome to the Feedback Loop, and this is the story of Ingo Swann, and it might be one of the most extraordinary things the CIA ever funded. Ingo Swann was born in Telluride, California in 1933. An unusual childhood by his own account, he began having out-of-body experiences as early as age 3, triggered by a tonsillectomy surgery. He claimed to have watched the procedure from above his own body. He was a bright, curious kid who grew up to study biology at Westminster College and served 3 years in the U.S. Army stationed in the Far East. After that, he moved to New York City, and for nearly a decade, he worked as a clerk at the United Nations Secretariat. On paper, nothing remarkable, but Swann was quietly fascinated by consciousness, by what the mind might be capable of, and in 1971, at the age of 37, he did something unusual. He volunteered for psychic research. He walked into the American Society for Psychical Research in New York City, sat down with a team of scientists, and on his first formal test, scored 7 out of 10 on a blind ESP trial. That's a result that statisticians would call highly significant. Word traveled fast in that world, and it eventually reached 2 physicists in California at a place called Stanford Research Institute. Stanford Research Institute, SRI, in Menlo Park, California, was one of the most advanced scientific research facilities in the world. In 1972, 2 physicists there, Dr. Harold Hal Puthoff and Dr. Russell Targ, were quietly investigating something most of their colleagues thought was nonsense. They wanted to know if psychic perception was real, and if it was, whether it could be measured. When they heard about Ingo Swann, they invited him to SRI. What happened next changed everything. They put Ingo Swann next to a device called a quark detector, a magnetometer essentially, one of the most sensitive instruments in physics, sealed inside a superconducting magnetic shield, buried under the floor. Nothing was supposed to affect its output. Swann closed his eyes, visualized the device, and the output graph went haywire. For 45 seconds, he appeared to stop it completely. The scientist couldn't explain it. That experiment triggered something much larger. Within months, 2 men arrived at SRI unannounced. They showed government identification. They were from the CIA's Directorate of Science and Technology. They had heard about Swann, and they had a proposal. The Cold War was heating up in a strange direction. U.S. intelligence had received reports that the Soviet Union was spending the equivalent of tens of millions of dollars annually on what they called psychotronic research, attempts to weaponize psychic ability for espionage. The Americans needed to know if it was real, and if it was, they needed their own version. What followed was a classified research program that would run for over 2 decades, consume $20 million in government funds, and involve over 40 military and intelligence personnel. But before any of that, there was Jupiter. April 27th, 1973. Puthoff is in the room. The recording equipment is running. Ingo Swann is seated, ready. The target they've given him, the planet Jupiter. He asked for 30 minutes of silence. He later said it took him about 3.5 minutes to actually get there, to make contact with what remote viewers describe as the signal. Then he started talking, and writing, and sketching. He described Jupiter's atmosphere as having a very high infrared spectrum, a poisonous composition of hydrogen, helium, ammonia, and methane. He described crystals in the upper atmosphere, later confirmed as ice crystals. He described gigantic cyclonic storms. He described something called rainbow-like effects, magnetic auroras at the poles. Each of those descriptions was later confirmed, some by the Pioneer probes in 1973 and 1974, which were already in transit when Swann was sitting in that lab, some by Voyager 1, which wouldn't reach Jupiter until March 1979. But there was one description that stood apart from everything else, one that no scientist on Earth could have known, one that, when it was confirmed 6 years later, made even the most skeptical researchers stop and look twice. He said, and these are his words from the transcript, "There's a ring, close within the atmosphere." In 1973, no scientist on Earth knew Jupiter had rings. Saturn had rings, Uranus had just been found to have rings, but Jupiter? Nothing in the scientific literature, nothing in any telescope observation, nothing. Swann's session notes described a ring, and sketched it, in 1973. On March 4th, 1979, 6 years and 309 days after that session, Voyager 1 transmitted a photograph back to Earth. Jupiter had a ring. The ring system was 9,000 kilometers wide, only 30 to 35 kilometers thick, virtually invisible from Earth. No probe had ever photographed it, no telescope had ever seen it, no astronomer had predicted it, and Ingo Swann had described it, sitting in a lab in California with his eyes closed. Now, before we go any further, I want to be clear about something, because I know exactly what some of you are thinking right now. You're thinking, could this be a coincidence? Could Swann have guessed? Could the transcript have been altered after the fact? These are legitimate questions, and they deserve honest answers. The session transcripts were held at SRI and later declassified by the CIA as a part of the Stargate document release in 1995. The documents are real. The signatures are real. The timeline is verifiable. Could it be coincidence? Puthoff and Targ ran statistical analysis on Swann's performance across dozens of sessions. The odds against chance accumulate to something that most statisticians would not dismiss lightly. What I'll tell you is this. Whatever your explanation is for what happened in that lab on April 27, 1973, the fact that it happened is not in dispute. And it wasn't a one-off. Within a year of the Jupiter session, the CIA had fully funded a classified remote viewing program at SRI. Swann would go on to help develop the training protocol that would eventually be used to train U.S. military intelligence officers. He called it coordinate remote viewing, a structured, repeatable process for accessing distant targets using nothing but a set of numbers. The program ran in secret for 22 years. I want to end this video with a question, not a conclusion. We've been taught to think of the mind as something contained inside the skull, a private, local thing, something that experiences only what the body senses bring to it. But what if it's not the complete picture? What if there's a mode of perception that operates outside those boundaries? Not magic, not supernatural, just a capability that science hasn't fully explained yet. Ingo Swann spent the rest of his life trying to map it, to understand it, to teach it. He believed, based on his own direct experience, that this was a natural human ability, one that had been trained out of most of us, one that could be trained back in. The Jupiter session isn't the end of the story, it's the beginning. In the years that followed, remote viewers at SRI and later at Fort Meade would be tasked against real intelligence targets, Soviet nuclear installations, missing aircraft, hostage locations. Some of those sessions produced results that intelligence analysts couldn't ignore. We'll be covering all of that on this channel. But if you want to go deeper right now, if you want to understand not just the history, but the practice, I teach a structured remote viewing course that covers protocols developed from this research. In this noisy, rushing world, your intuition is still whispering. Premonitions, precognitive dreams, subtle signals just beneath the surface. This skill was developed in secret government programs, and now it's yours. Sit with paper and pen, receive a blind target, and let pure intuition flow. Only after you finish is the target revealed. The Feedback Loop Remote Viewing Starter Kit, an 8-lesson video course teaching you how to remote view from scratch, with structured lessons, printable session sheets, and blind validation targets. Use the discount code in the description below to get 10% off and start developing your non-local awareness today. Ingo Swann died in February 2013 at age 79. In his later years, he wrote over a dozen books on consciousness, psychic ability, and what he called the coming psychic renaissance. He never claimed to be special. He claimed to be evidence. Evidence that the human mind is capable of something we don't yet have the science to fully explain. On April 27, 1973, in a lab in California with no telescope and no data, he drew a ring around Jupiter. Make of that what you will.